Hello everyone, how are you doing? How are you spending your time these days? I am looking forward to hearing from you. Our lesson today is Unit 13 Grammar. We are studying modals. So in the name of Allah, the most precious, the most merciful, let's start. Modals are helping verbs. They come to help the main verb because sometimes the main verb can give us the meaning that we need. So, the modals that we are studying today are must, have to, must not, and don't have to. After modals, we always use the base form of the verb, so we always use verb 1. We use must and have to talk about obligations and necessities. And when something is necessary, so it means that I need to do it. In another way, we use must and have to talk about what the person needs to do. So let's have an example. Students must pass the exam in order to graduate. They need to pass the exam in order to graduate. What about if we replace must by have to? Students have to pass the exam in order to graduate. So let's agree that have to and must have similar meanings. Let's have another example. Dogs must be leashed at all times. They need to be leashed. What about if we replace must by have to? Dogs have to be leashed at all times. So they give similar meaning. Let's have a note. In the present tense, when the subject is singular, have to is changed into has to. Oh my God, so I can't say haves, I say has to. Let's take an example. A dog has to be leashed at all times. One dog, so it has to. Don't forget that the pronouns he, she, and it are singular pronouns. Alright, another note. In the past tense, we don't use have to nor has to. So what do we use? We use had to. I had to go to the gym yesterday. So because it's in the past, I used had to. And now let's move to the negative form, must not. We use must not or mustn't to talk about what a person shouldn't do. Something is not allowed. Let's have an example. You mustn't drive without a license. If I don't have this license, I must not drive. I should not drive. Let's move to another example. We must not be late. It's not allowed to go late to your work or to the school. Let's move to don't or doesn't have to. We use don't have to or doesn't have to talk about what a person doesn't need to do. Something is optional. I can do it, but if I don't want, I have the option. When the subject is singular or the pronoun he, pronoun she, or it, we use doesn't have to. But if the subject is a plural or the pronouns we, they, you, or I use don't have to. So let's agree that with singular we use doesn't have to and with plural don't have to. Let's move to an example. You don't have to smile. You can smile. It's nice to smile. If you don't want to smile, it's your option. Let's have another example. He doesn't have to wear a tie. There is no problem if he wears a tie, but he doesn't have to. It's not a must. We can also use not have to in the past tense. And here we use didn't have to. You didn't have to buy me flowers. If you buy me flowers, it's nice, but you didn't have to. Now let's move to student book page 133. First of all, let's listen to the song.
Listen and sing along. The news today.
I have to know what happened. I mustn't miss the news. I must buy a newspaper, but which one shall I choose? You don't have to buy a paper. You can use my new smartphone, and we can check the internet while we're walking home.
Alright, let's read exercise E. Read the sentences. Which one is about what someone needs to do? When I need to do something, so I must do it. I must buy a newspaper. You don't have to buy a paper, so something is optional. You don't need to do it. Let's move to the box. Let's read it together. Learn grammar. Must, mustn't, have to, and don't have to. Use must and have to talk about what a person needs to do. Use mustn't to talk about what a person shouldn't do. Use don't have to talk about what a person doesn't need to do. So it's like a revision of what we studied. Let's have examples. You must pay for the internet to use it at home. So you need to pay for the internet, because if you don't pay, you will not use it at home. You mustn't take a newspaper without paying for it. You shouldn't do this. You don't have to carry a computer to check the news. So I can do it, but if I don't want, I don't have to. Now let's do this exercise. Read the sentences, circle the correct verb. Number 1. Maki has to or doesn't have to help her mother cook because she has to study. So because she has to study, she has the option. She doesn't have to help her mother. Number 2. You must or mustn't bring your smartphone into class. Leave it in your locker. Sure, it's mustn't because it's not allowed to bring your smartphone into class. Number 3. Our teacher is not happy. He says we have to or we don't have to study harder. Because he's not happy, so we have to study harder. And now let's move to workbook, page 120 and 121. Reggie must watch television after school. He needs to watch television after school. And we can use the negative and say Reggie mustn't watch television after school. And this means that he is not allowed to do this. Daria has to use the web for her homework. She needs to use the web for her homework. Daria doesn't have to use the web for her homework. She can do her homework without using the web. The radio stations have to broadcast the news. Must or need to broadcast the news. The radio stations don't have to broadcast the news. It's an option. Workers at the company had to leave the building. They need to leave. Workers at the company didn't have to leave the building. They can stay, but they can leave. And they choose. So you see how is the difference between must and mustn't, has to and doesn't have to, and the other forms. Now let's move to exercise B. Complete the sentences with the words in the box. Let's read the box first. Have to, don't have to, has to, doesn't have to, had to, didn't have to, and mustn't. Number 1. Information in newspapers be correct at all times. They need to be correct, so they has to be correct. And I use has, not have, because information is considered singular. Number 2, you own a smartphone, but it's very useful. We know that when we have but, so we should have not in one of the sentences, and here we need don't have to. You don't have to own a smartphone, but it's very useful, so it's your option to have it or not. Number 3, Lisa, write a comment on my blog, but I'm happy she did. She had the option, so she didn't have to write a comment on my blog, but I am happy that she did. We have did, I guess that it's in the past. Now let's move to number 4. Students chat on social networks while they are at school. So because they are at school, it's not allowed to them to do such a thing. So they mustn't chat on social networks. Number 5, my father delivered newspapers when he was a boy. In the past, he had to do this thing. He had to deliver newspapers. Number 6, most publishers include advertising in their newspapers. Have to do this because it's a must. They need to. Now let's move to number 7. A blog look fancy. It just needs interesting news. Because it needs interesting news, so it doesn't have to look fancy. Exercise C is a homework. So let's move to exercise D. Rewrite the sentences to make them correct. We are going to rewrite. Number 1, students must bring their smartphones into the classroom with them. It's wrong that students must bring their smartphones. They mustn't do, because it's not allowed. They don't need their smartphones into the classroom. Let's move to number 2. The students don't have to read newspaper articles in English class. It's not optional for students to do or not, so they need to read newspaper articles in English class to improve their reading. So we change don't have to and we write have to instead of it. It becomes the students have to read newspaper articles in English class. Now do number 3 and 4 by yourselves, please. They are homework as well. Let's do exercise E together. Unscramble the sentences. Number 1, let's agree that the sentence should start with subject plus modal plus verb plus tense, the complement of the sentence. Let's start with number 1. Printing has the new press a publisher by 2. So where is the subject? I guess that the nouns in this sentence are press and publisher. Publisher needs the press or the press needs the publisher? The publisher needs the press. Okay, so we are going to start with the publisher, and then what is the modal verb? The modal here is has to. The publisher has to, and the verb buy. The publisher has to buy, and let's complete the sentence, a new printing press. Now let's move to number 2. Have to blog. Advertising doesn't have a I. The subject here is a blog and the modal is doesn't have to. Okay, where is the verb? The verb here is have because we have two halves. One of them is the main verb and the other comes with the modal. So a blog doesn't have to have advertising. And now number 3. Network, have, join, people, social, to, don't. The subject is people, the modal verb is don't have to, and the verb is join. So people don't have to join a social network. Number 4, the subject is excellent, the mass media, and here we have must as a modal, and the verb is broadcast. So the mass media must broadcast important news. Let's move to the last one. Don't play, use, have, games, the, to, you, web, to. The subject is you, excellent, And the modal is don't have to, and the verb is use. So you don't have to use the web to play games. This was our lesson today. Please do the homework and send me pictures. See you soon. Goodbye.